Bava Metzia DAF YOMI, sponsored for Refuah Shalema for Yoshua ben Binsa. We start with the Mishnah on Tes Amud Beis. The Mishnah's first law is one who is riding, sees a Metzia on the ground, and asks a pedestrian to give it to him. The law is the pedestrian can claim it as his. Evidently, the reason is, even if he picked it up for the rider does not acquire, because in doing so, he prevents others from picking it up. The Gemara brings a similar case concerning Peah. Ula says, regarding the case of Peah, it is discussing a wealthy man who picks it up for a poor man. The one Tana, Rabbi Eliezer, allows him to pick it up for the poor person because he allows two migos. One is that the rich man can renounce ownership of his property and be eligible for Peah. And since he can acquire it for himself, he can acquire it for the poor man as well. The Chachamim, on the other hand, hold that we can apply only one migo. According to Ula, both agree a poor man can pick it up. He can pick up the Peah for another poor person. Rav Nachman, on the other hand, holds the argument is even from a poor man picking up Peah for another poor person. According to Ula, our Mishnah that permits the pedestrian to keep the lost object must be referring to a case where he initially picked it up for himself. But if he picked it up for the rider, it would belong to the rider. The second case in the Mishnah teaches, even if he picked it up for himself, if he gave it to the rider, it belongs to the rider. Rav Nachman would explain the case of Peah and Metzia similarly. Both teach one cannot pick up for another, even a poor person for another poor person, because it is to the detriment of others. Rav Chia says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, one can pick up a lost object on behalf of another. The Mishnah's case was where he said, the rider said to the pedestrian, give it to me, not acquire for me. Therefore, even if he picked it up for the rider, he can retract before he gives it to him. The next thing the Gemara discusses is the law of a worker who finds a lost object. The Gemara says, if the employer hired him for a specific task, he can keep what he finds, but the employer deducts the time he used to procure it. If he was hired for non-specific tasks, then the lost object belongs to the employer because the worker's hand is the extension of the employer's. The second Mishnah we're going to discuss is one who attempts to acquire a lost object by way of falling on it. The Mishnah teaches that the one who grabs it from underneath him acquires it. Although the Chachamim instituted that a person's Dalet Amos acquires for him so that people do not fight over lost objects, in this case it does not work. One, by falling on it, he indicated he did not want to utilize the kinyan of Dalet Amos. Reb Papa answers that a poor person cannot acquire Peah by falling on it because the takana did not include somebody else's field. All the poor person can do is collect there. Regarding a lost object, since he fell on it, he did not intend to acquire it with Dalet Amos. Rav Sheshes, on the other hand, says the Chacham did not institute their takana in a public domain, where it would be difficult to ascertain in whose Dalet Amos it is. The Mishnah is talking about, in Rosh Hashanah, the law of Chatzir and the kinyan of Dalet Amos in respect to a katana. Reish Lakish holds she is not entitled to either of them because they acquire like one shliach. Since she cannot make a shliach, she cannot utilize them. Rabbi Yochanan, on the other hand, holds that the basis is that these reshuyas are an extension of her hand. Since she can receive a get in her hand, she can receive them in her chatzar or Dalet Amos. The parameters of ein shliach lidvar avera. The Gemara assumes that if a chatzar works as a shliach, then one should be liable if his courtyard would steal an object for him, which contradicts the principle of ein shliach lidvar avera. Ravina answers, it applies to exempt the sender only to one who is responsible for his actions. Rav Sama says it applies only to one that had a choice whether to comply or not to comply with the sender. Both these reasons do not apply, of course, to a chatzir. The difference between the two is, for example, a Kohen asks Yisrael to be his agent to marry a divorcee, or an adult asks a woman to round the head of his child. According to the opinion that it applies to one who is culpable, here both are not culpable. The Yisrael is not culpable marrying a divorcee, and a woman is not culpable to round the head of a child. And therefore, the sender would not be liable. According to the opinion, it excludes one who does not have a choice. Both of these people have a choice not to comply with their sender, and therefore would be culpable. The Gemara concludes that get is an extension of her hand. The argument between Rav Yochanan and Reish Lakish is one of three. Do we compare a lost object to a get? Or do we compare them as far as a katana? The argument is we do compare them as far as a katana. The argument is do we compare them as far as a cotton? And the third is really there is no argument. One referred to a get that she has a chatzar, and one referred to a lost object that she has no chatzar.